Jeff Young, so it's great to have you back on. This is the first time in season that we've talked officially. We talked earlier in the year, back during the lockout, so it's nice to have actual baseball games to talk about.
Yeah, it's it's good that we're talking baseball again. I mean, I don't know how everyone does it during lockouts like what we went through, but creating content during that time is very tough. It's like pulling teeth. You just kind of have to get creative and think of things that people might want to read about. So it's tough. But it's great that baseball started up when it did. Getting spring training in and getting everything started pretty much on time with the regular season. I mean, they're still going to play 162 games this year, and it's going to be a little condensed because I think the baseball season lost like a week's worth of days off, so it's going to be tough. But it's it's going to be a good challenge for a lot of teams.
So yeah, it is definitely great having actual games. We're almost already a month into the season. It's kind of baseball always the season always kind of goes fast. I feel like once you start, you have games every day, and then before you know it, you're at it's May, Memorial Day, it's July 4th. Before you know it, it's almost like the trade deadline's here. So the Giants, we're talking on Saturday. They beat the Nationals. I know they lost on Friday night, but the Giants are 14-7. So more or less, I'd say picking up where they left off last season, just kind of winning games almost every night. It feels like. So is that what it feels like to you and all of Giants fan nation in terms of this baseball team right now? Pretty much, I guess, looking like you expected, maybe, or at least based on what it looked like last year in the start.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back like 12 months ago and the Giants were off to a pretty hot month of April, I mean, it's a little different compared to this year because there weren't quite the expectations that there are now. With the Giants in the offseason, pretty much rebuilding their entire rotation, bringing back Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, and then bringing in Alex Cobb and Carlos Rodon, and then adding Jock Peterson to the lineup. I mean, and especially after winning 107 games, it just feels like the expectations are way different this year compared to at the beginning of last year. So it just kind of feels like it's carried over from the end of last year into where we're at now. The Giants are a good team. Built on good pitching and good defense, and even with the departures of Buster Posey and Chris Bryant, and Donovan Solano, they're still producing just enough offensively. They're actually better than I think I expected early on. It helps to have a guy like Jock Peterson who's been on fire to start the year. But yeah, I think 14-7, strong start. I can't say it's totally unexpected. I mean, they did just drop two in a row before today's win. So they were even looking a little better a couple of days ago. But yeah, I feel like this is kind of who they are. They're going to win games based on good pitching and good defense and a very strong bullpen.
Yeah, so you mentioned guys like Buster Posey and Chris Bryant are, of course, gone. I don't think you expected Chris Bryant to maybe become a division rival, at least when it comes to the Rockies. I mean, maybe the Padres, maybe the Dodgers, but I don't think any of us had Colorado making that move. Did you think that would happen?
No, I mean that was just a bizarre kind of addition by the Rockies. I mean, for them it was an opportunity for themselves to get better. To add a guy like Chris Bryant, who was a former MVP, and I think he's like a four-time All-Star, can play all around the field. So I mean, it made a lot of sense for the Rockies, but with where they're at in the competitive cycle, I mean, they were pretty rough last year. So I mean, it caught me by surprise. We started hearing kind of connections to it a couple of days before he signed. So I thought it was I thought it was Scott Boras just putting it out there that hey, there's interest. I'll be kind of curious to see what type of interest Chris Bryant had because it doesn't sound like the Giants made
Yep.
a legitimate offer. I'm curious because he's an interesting case in the sense that on one
Mhm.
hand, he is a former MVP, but on the other hand, he hasn't really performed at that level for a few years now. So I wonder if there was a bit
Mhm.
of a gap between his representatives and what kind of the market had for him in terms of what he was looking for. He ended up signing for like 7 years, 180 million or something to that effect. So obviously ended up getting paid, but I just wonder if there were other teams involved in that. I don't know if that's the case, to be honest.
Yeah, at least for him, he'll be able to at least you would think hit home runs. I don't think he's hit I'm trying to think if he's even had a home
No,
run yet
I
this season. I know he's kind of not the power's not exactly there in that effect. You would expect Bryant to, pick it up offensively. He's in Coors Field, so he's in the right situation there to at least get the numbers up and kind of do his thing. And maybe, you want to win, but maybe there's less pressure on him right now. He can
yeah,
just kind of have fun, win, play games. We'll see how that all shakes out. I'm sure that I don't know. I don't expect him to actually finish his deal in Colorado. I'm expecting him to get traded in a couple of years, so we'll see what ends up happening with that. But and you also mentioned, of course, Buster Posey. He, of course, retired. Maybe a little surprising that he retired when he did, but great career, obviously. And so Joey Bart steps in. So Joey Bart, what do you think so far of what he has shown to this point in the season?
yeah, I mean, Joey Barty's got big shoes to fill, and I hope, for his sake that he doesn't really try to compare himself to Buster Posey or trying to fill those expectations in any way. I think he's a very different player. His skill set's different, so I think he just needs to be kind of the best player that he can be, and not really, putting any added pressure on himself by trying to, live up to the expectations of Buster Posey. So, so far from what we've seen, it's been kind of a mixed bag. Offensively, he's shown some of the power that we've seen, and when he connects, it really the ball makes a difference out off the bats. And I know that sounds cliche, as it's the case with a lot of hitters in baseball, but he really swings aggressively and swings hard, and when he does connect, it can go pretty far. But with that, there's a lot of strikeouts. There's a lot of swing and miss to his game. He's improved his plate discipline a little bit this year compared to a couple of seasons ago. But we've already seen the highs and lows of Joey Bart in April. He went, I think, 2 weeks almost without a base hit, if you can believe that. Just kind of shocking. Yesterday he had a 3-hit game, and it was the first hit he had since April 15th. So I mean, it's just there was a lot of swing and miss during that time, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of unproductive outs, and that's to be expected. There's going to be some strikeouts with his game. He showed off the power. I think he's really going to need to cut down on his strikeouts if he's going to be able to provide any value offensively, because right now his strikeout rate is over 40%, and it doesn't matter how many home runs you hit. You can't really produce a lot of value at that point. I think 30% is really the threshold in which it becomes tough to tolerate a player's shortcomings if they're striking out 30% of the time. And then defensively, it's also been kind of a mixed bag. I know he grades out pretty strong in terms of pitch framing, but there's been some aspects of his game that kind of surprised me because they didn't stick out as much as they have. So Warren, that's to be expected because he's playing against advanced competition at this point. But his blocking has left a little bit to be desired, and it could be a product of the pitchers really not hitting their targets. But there have been instances where there's been a lot of, maybe it's wild pitches, maybe it's pass balls, but it just feels like he's not blocking as effectively as I've seen in the past in the minors. Different he's catching different pitchers in the minors, and that's to be expected. And then he's shown flashes of a really strong arm behind the plate, but man, it just feels like the scouting report on him right now is to run on him. So there's been a lot of base stealing so far. I think he's only caught 13 or 15% of would-be base stealers, so that's really below league average at this point. So overall, I mean, offensively, I think he's done well. I mean, it's shocking. Actually, when you look at it, I was just looking at his numbers. He has a 131 OPS plus to start the year, and again, he went 2 weeks without a base hit, so pretty incredible. He has 3 home runs. So yeah, it's a different catcher behind the plate, different skill set altogether compared to Buster Posey. I think it's been a
Yeah.
mixed bag so far, but I think there's room for him to grow from it.
Were strikeouts in the minors a big problem for him?
Yeah, there's always going to be some swing and miss to his game. Not quite what we've seen So he's 6'2", he's
Yeah.
238. He's a really big guy. And
Yeah.
I think some of the strikeout issues are a factor of him, going outside of the strike zone and getting the pitches that he can't hit. And then there's
Right.
some of the strikeouts are due to just being jammed on the inside. He's got really long arms, so pitchers have really tried to attack him on the inside part of the strike zone, and they've had some success at it. So strikeouts were an issue for him in the minors. I think he was sitting at around 25%, which is fine. But it's ballooned to about 45% to start this year. So hopefully it's a trend that progresses to the mean as the season goes on, but it's a concerning trend nonetheless.
Do you think that if baseball does go to the automatic or the robot umps, how do you think that's going to work when you have, strike zones always vary from player to player anyway? So how do you think that's going to work if you have robo umps and then you have, I guess, a set strike zone, whether it's an Aaron Judge type of a player or a smaller, shorter player? Like, how do you think that's going to work?
Yeah, they've tried it out in the Arizona Fall League. They've tried it out in some indie leagues. I'm not sure if you follow Eric Burns at all, but he's been a huge proponent of it, or at least he was a few years ago. And they tried it out at a local league in the Bay Area. Um, that's is a professional league. It's got like 6 teams. So I think they have to account for the. I mean, they obviously have to account for the player's size, because you can't call the same strikes to a guy who's 6'5" versus a guy who's 5'11". So I think
Right.
whatever technology
Yeah.
they come up with has to automatically adjust to the fact that the strike zone is going to be different from player to player. And I mean,
Yeah.
from what we've seen, it's at least with the K zone. That's a part of every game that we see. I mean, those things look pretty
Yeah.
accurate. So there is technology
Hmm.
to do so. It's just I guess fine tuning it so that when it is eventually used, that there aren't as many bugs as there are right now. You still see instances, or at least I did a couple of years ago in the Arizona Fall League, where pitches were just off and they were still called strikes, and vice versa. And there's still some bugs to flesh out. But from what I understand, there's still going to be a home plate umpire, and he's going to be reading the calls
Yeah.
out as the game goes on, and that part isn't going to change. So I think
Yeah.
what they're going to have to do is just figure out how they can adjust to the different hitter sizes.
Do you want the robo umps or would you rather it be human error?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of frustrating, and I know it's tough for fans to watch because we do have the K zone, and for better or worse, we can see right away whether something's a strike or not. And I mean, these umpires
Yeah.
for the most part they're very good. I mean, at calling balls and strikes, and it's I don't know if it's good for the product at this point that the K zone appears where it is, because you can tell. I mean, people were just sitting on their couch and saying like, how did that idiot call a strike when it was like 2 inches off the plate? And it's it's the ball's going 95 miles an hour. You just there's an element of guesswork at that. I think when it is eventually implemented, it's gonna benefit the game. Like most of the changes we've seen, especially when it comes to technology. I mean, whether it be a pitch clock or adding replay or anything like that. I mean, I think it's benefited the game to an extent. So I mean, I'm one of those guys that's kind of slow to come around to certain things. Like I didn't like the intentional walk no longer being thrown like it is or like it used to
Yeah.
be, and I don't like the runner at second or
Right.
anything like that. And the double headers being 7 innings, but they've at least gotten rid of that last one. So I think when it does eventually come into play, it's going to be good for the game.
Yeah. And you have the umpire scorecard Twitter account
Yeah.
too, which shows, how effective umpires were. So I agree. I think it's great having that technology, but it's almost a deterrent because it just magnifies the egregious calls that we see. Like you said, they are pretty good. I mean, they are usually pretty good. You have to be at the major league level, even though we do see how awful or bad certain calls might be, or Angel Hernandez, things like that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm sure it's coming, but kind of like the DH in the National League, another favorite of yours. But anyway, back on the Giants. So Jock Peterson, you mentioned his name, hot start, but he's out right now. So what's his status? When do you expect him to be back?
I think he sustained an abductor strain a couple of days ago, and he hasn't been put on the injured list yet. So I think the Giants are holding out hope that he won't miss enough time to be placed on injured list. So he's still active as of now. He hasn't played in the past couple of games. The Giants were off on um, Thursday, and I think they're also off on Monday as well. So I think they're hoping that he can go when they play against the Dodgers in a couple of days. But yeah, I mean, when he's been healthy, he's been fantastic. I can't say I was totally expecting it right out the gates. He has 6 home runs. He's every time he makes contact, he hits the crap out of the ball, for lack of a better phrase. But he's
Yeah.
he swings the bat extremely hard. I think that it makes me kind of laugh at times because with a guy like Jock Peterson, and I know you saw him with the Cubs last year. There's no two-strike approach with a guy who hits for as much power as Jock Peterson does. And it's funny because like when I was growing up, you'd have 2 strikes and it's like, all right, you got to choke up, you got to think about going the other way. With Jock Peterson, every time he swings the bat, he's trying to hit a home run. So so far it's been a great addition. Hopefully he doesn't miss any time, and I think the Giants are confident that he should be ready to go in a couple of days.
So Logan Webb is, I guess, basically the ace of this starting rotation for the Giants. He really came on strong last year. I mean, I guess he's maybe had some struggles. Even today's game against the Nationals, he wasn't maybe the most effective, but he still got the win. He gave up like 11 hits, but it was like, I think what was the final score? 9-3.
Yeah.
So I mean, he didn't give up a ton of runs, but so what's up with Webb, the slider, and also, I mean, in general, I feel like people have to remember too, not making it like an excuse, but spring training was shortened or abbreviated, so I'm sure that April more or less was kind of maybe not an extended spring training, but players are still trying to get their groove going throughout this first month.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point. I've always said that baseball players are creatures of habit. So the fact that spring training wasn't 6 weeks like it typically is, I think it takes away from their performance at the beginning of the season to an extent. And we've seen kind of an increase in injuries so far, especially when it comes to pitchers. So the Giants have 2 of their top guys without Alex Cobb and Anthony DeSclafani on injured list currently. Neither one is expected to miss a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, that's a good point about spring training being shortened. There is a lot of risk in that, and I think that risk has been realized to an extent, and that a lot of teams are down 1 or 2 pitchers or even more. So hopefully, as the season progresses, that pitchers kind of get their stamina and their pitch count up, that they're better protected from injury. With what we've seen from Logan Webb so far, it's kind of more of the same of what we saw last year. I mean, he's really emerged into, just an excellent starting pitcher, attacking his strike zone, getting ground balls at a pretty good rate, rarely giving up home runs. His changeup is just an above average pitch. His slider, to your notes, has not been as effective as it was last year. I think if you look at his Baseball Savant page, his whiff rate on his slider this year is 25.7% compared to 47% last year. So he's not getting nearly enough swings and misses on his slider that we saw last year, but that could just be a product of the shortened spring training. I mean, he's had some good starts where he's been dominant, and then his last couple have been a little more rocky. But even today, he didn't have his stuff at all. He didn't really have a feel for his slider. He gave up 11 hits. Some of those were kind of bloopers. I don't know what's going on with this series, but it just feels like every time the Nationals have a batted ball, that ball finds a way to find a hole. So there was some hard contact, but there was also a lot of like ground balls that just made its way through the infield, or just put the infielder out of position to make a play. I mean, Webb was still pretty effective today, just going 6 innings, kind of grinding through it, giving up 3 runs. So it's going to be more of the same. Again, he hasn't been as strong as he was at the end of last year, but he's still been a pretty effective pitcher to start the year, and I think a pretty good number two or number one B, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, he's gone at least 6 innings in every start but one, which was the game against the
Yeah,
Mets. And I mean, he hasn't even given up more than 3 runs in any game, even in the Mets start. He got into the fourth, but obviously gave up some hits and I guess 3 walks, got knocked out a little early.
yeah.
But it's kind of funny too that he's already pitched against the Nats in consecutive starts, which you don't really see very often. So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at his who the Giants have played, who he's pitched against. Miami's kind of a surprise start so far. Padres, I guess, are probably going to be pretty good, more or less. The Mets have been all pretty good, so the Nats are kind of a weird
Yeah.
one. I mean, we know they're not that great, but uh, yeah, the Mets. In that Mets, how was that series against the Mets for the Giants? Obviously, the Mets have gone off to a hot start. They're supposed to be they're trying to get back in the playoffs this year, and so far they're looking pretty good. So was that kind of I mean, it's April, but a barometer for the Giants, or how did you view that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good measuring stick. The Mets are going to be a good team this year. You got to like the additions that they made. Several of the additions that they made, I wanted the Giants to make, including adding a guy like Marcana, who is a pretty has really emerged as a really good outfielder. Starling Marte is another really good outfielder. Eduardo Escobar, switch hitter, can play all around the field. You don't really have to figure out how to get him into the lineup. He's just versatile and a good enough hitter that he's always going to be in there. And then they add Max Scherzer and trade for Chris Bassett. So it was a really nice offseason for them, and they proved to be a very good team. I think the series kind of went as expected. It felt like the Giants had a chance to at least split it early on. Alex Cobb was pitching well, and then he ran into a little trouble in the fifth inning and then sustained an injury that knocked him out of the game. So it did feel like the Giants played pretty competitive for 3 of the 4 games. It didn't work out in the end as they dropped 3 of the 4. But yeah, the Mets are good, and I think it's early, but you just know that playing in the division that they're playing in right now, I mean, they get to play the Nationals 19 times, and the Nationals are not a good team. And then the rest of the division, I mean, Miami, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. I mean, it's kind of a toss up as to who the next best team is there, to be honest. And Miami is probably gets my vote just because I think they have a really, really good rotation. And I think they're also just being overlooked. They're not, a really good offensive team at this point, but they have enough pitching, and if they could just put together a couple of runs every game, they're going to be in a position to win. So the Mets are good. It was a good measuring stick for the Giants. They're still out a couple of guys. I mean, Evan Longoria, Lamont Wade Jr., Tommy La Stella, all these guys haven't played at all this season. So, and then of course the Mets also had a pretty significant injury with Jacob DeGrom being out. So, just to be fair, they were down a couple of guys as well. Yeah, but they're a good team. They're going to be a tough team to play, especially in New York. And then when DeGrom comes back, they're going to be even tougher.
Yeah, and I like Buck Showalter too. I think that's a great manager, good hire for a team like the Mets. So it'll be interesting to see. But I'm always waiting for the Mets to kind of mess it up in the end, like they seem to do more often than
They're
not.
good
So
at
we'll
that.
see. Yeah. So I always think back to like the early, it was like '06 or not '06. It was like '07. They had that choke at the end of the season. Yeah, they've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
But so on the Giants, what we kind of talked about Bart and maybe some injuries, stuff like that. But what concerns you for this team? I mean, it seems like really the Giants, they figured out this thing. Like they know how to put together a team that's going to compete, but not just compete, but win like they've been doing. So, what concerns you? And also, what's up with the Giants' third base coach? Have there been any weird sends or anything crazy going on the third base at third base over there?
Is that do you have an example in mind for the third base coach?
I don't have a specific example, but Dieter, I saw his tweet about something over at third base. I don't know if there was is there an excessive amount of sends or not sending runners enough, or have you noticed anything?
I mean, I can't say I've noticed a ton. They just seem kind of aggressive
Yeah.
on the
Maybe
sends, and
that's what
that's
it
fine.
was. Yeah, yeah,
That's probably what it is. I mean, my approach to that is, make the team make a play,
yeah,
and if they make a good play, then that they did what they needed to do. But I think it's good to put the pressure on the defense. Because that creates the opportunity for them to mess up. So I haven't really seen anything that stood out. I mean, the guy that he's replacing, Ron Wotus, was a third base coach for the Giants for like 15 years. Actually, maybe less than that because he was also the bench coach. So Wotus had coached with the Giants since like 1998. He was either a third base coach or a bench coach for 24 straight
yeah,
years, 23 straight years. So pretty
yeah,
incredible career, and he's still involved in some way, kind of in the front office at this point as like a special advisor. Um, and then what concerns me right now is just health for the Giants. They've had a COVID outbreak. They have 5 guys who are on the COVID injured list. One was already on a 60-day DL, so that from a roster standpoint isn't necessarily a factor, but hopefully they all recover and are able to come back pretty soon. They did add a lot of guys with a lot of injury risk to the rotation. So, I mean, my concern is how many starts are they going to get out of all these guys? Carlos Rodon, Alex Cobb, Alex Wood,
yeah,
and DeSclafani. I mean, 2 of those pitchers are already on the injured list. So, I mean, that's the thing that stands out. What surprised me so far is the defense hasn't been as crisp as I would have expected, and that could be a product of the shortened spring training as
yeah,
well. There have just been, and also a lot of guys are kind of playing out of position right now. Evan Longoria, for example, when he's healthy, he's still a pretty good third baseman. And there's just been a lot of issues this year at third base, and just overall, it surprises me a little bit how the defense has not been as strong as we saw last year. And that's to be expected. I mean, it's hard to replace a guy like Buster Posey. I mean, especially at catcher, he was so good defensively, great game caller, and uh, it's it's um it's it's tough to fill those shoes, and I don't,
yeah.
it's not to say that Joey Bart can't do that. It's just it's a different skill set. But yeah, overall, I think the defense hasn't been as strong as we've seen. Last year, it rated it as one of the best in baseball by whatever metric you want to go with, whether it be defensive runs saved or else above average. Um, but this year, I think they're more middle of the pack. Even Brendan Crawford looks like he's kind of out to a rough start defensively, so that's surprising to me.
Yeah, so I was just looking it up on Twitter just now. So I saw Dieter Kurtenbach's tweet earlier today. He said the Giants organization is really, really good at so many small things that add up to wins. Third base coaching is not one of them. So
Oh,
I didn't know if there's maybe a specific thing that happened today or what that was maybe referencing. But I was just curious to throw that at you and see if you had a specific example or if you shared that sentiment. But maybe it was just the aggression. Maybe you guys, maybe that's what it was. And like you said, maybe it's like, yeah, force the team to make a play. So maybe if that was it, maybe it's like a difference of opinion. I don't know.
yeah, I think there might have been a play last night where they sent a guy from third base and he was out by a few feet. I can't recall the play exactly, but I don't remember there being a play today. But I could have missed it, which wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, nothing really stands out.
What are you looking at in the minors? Who are guys that fans should be, looking at or excited about? Sean Roby's been crushing the ball in Richmond. I've sent you like so many home run videos of him so far. I feel like he has like 8 home runs in April. But anyway, yeah, Roby, or who are guys that fans should be looking at, excited for in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of prospects. It depends on whether you want to focus on guys who are closer to the major leagues as opposed to guys who are a little further away, like a Marco Luciano or Luis Matos or Kyle Harrison. I mean, those are kind of the household names at this point that the Giants fans are familiar with because they're some of the higher end prospects. But, closer to that, there's Elliot Ramos. Who was a first round pick a few years ago. He played at Augusta. He's still very young. Actually, I think he's either 21 or he's a young 21 or a young 22. I forget exactly what it was exactly. And then there's Sean Jelly, who's a 6'11" pitcher who's shockingly coordinated for somebody his size. I mean, his delivery is very repeatable. He really offers a unique arm angle for hitters that's pretty tough to replicate. I mean, when this is just me talking from my experience, but if I ever faced a guy who was over like 6'5", like it just added a new element that was always tough for me to pick up. And that's just me. I'm not a tall hitter, so it's different for guys who are probably 6 feet and above. So they're probably more used to it. But he's still, he's going through AAA a second time, and I think the results have been a little more promising. And he's on the 40-man roster, so with how the Giants kind of use the 40-man roster, pretty much every player on it, I mean, he's going to come up at some points. I could go through every level, to be honest. One guy who stood out in AAA is a guy named David VR. He's a third baseman. He was an 11th round pick, I think, in 2018. Really, really good power hitter. I think he set the record last year for Richmond for home runs in a single season, and it seems like Sean Roby is going to break that record.
That's right.
At this rate by the middle of the season. But yeah, I mean, David VR, he's off to a nice start. He hits for a lot of power. He's made some nice changes to his swing. His glove has improved quite a bit from his college days. So I think he's made some nice adjustments. He's somebody that who isn't on the 40-man roster who I'm kind of looking at. There are a lot of guys at every level, and I could just talk on and on and on about each player, but I'm not going to bore everyone with that.
Yeah, David VR, that's right. I do remember that name last year when I was talking to Trey Wilson, the Squirrels broadcaster, radio broadcaster last fall.
Yep.
We were talking about VR, and the diamond is not a home run
No.
hitting ballpark typically, so it's crazy that guys are kind of just crushing the ball. But so many pitchers today throw the ball hard and fast, and so many guys can just crush the ball. So I mean, it's just these athletes are crazy. But one thing I wanted to go back to that I was just thinking about. So we were talking about like Logan Webb doesn't have the feel for the slider, and that's common for pitchers to not quite have a feel for a certain pitch, as great as they might be. Max Scherzer is going to struggle at times. He's not going to have this best
Yeah.
pitch or whatever. I always kind of wish I could talk to a pitcher and kind of get like in depth, we hear that, but I always wonder, like, obviously you're not going to have 100% stuff every day,
Yeah.
but I kind of want to hear, like, what is it like? What makes that pitch maybe like, it could be as common as like a blister forming, and obviously a blister is going to derail a starter if it's on their, the right hand or the wrong hand, wrong
Yeah.
finger. So, yeah, it's always curious. I'm always curious to kind of get kind of the inside scoop on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, I think it's muscle memory to an extent. It could be an injury as well. There could be that. There's been nothing with Logan Webb to
Yeah, yeah,
suggest that, but I think it's
right.
just muscle memory. I mean, hitting is all
Yeah,
muscle memory, and there are some days where it feels like every ball you hit is a line drive, and there are some days where every ball you hit is a foul ball, and it doesn't make any
yeah, yeah.
sense. And you try to identify what the issue is and try to fix it, but and then at that point, and you kind of mess up your mechanics even more. But I think it's a combination of just a feel for a pitch. Like when you grip the ball, you grip it a certain way, and then with the slider, you add some spin to it.
Yeah.
And then getting that release point down, that's probably the biggest factor of everything. I mean, and they have so much information to be able to understand like what his release point was, what his spin rate was last year compared to this year, to kind of identify what he needs to do to improve the effectiveness of his slider. But I think it's a combo of just a general feel for the pitch, snapping it
Yeah.
at the right time, and finding that release point.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I try to relate it to like everyday people and their jobs. Like we could be great at whatever we do, but then we have a day where it's like, wait, how do I spell this
Uh,
word, or how do I do this again? So kind of like that. But so one last thing I wanna drop on you, which I didn't show you in the like pre-show notes or whatever. But there was a sports story that happened last night in hockey, and it's happened quite a few times in which they have what they call the EBUG, or the emergency backup
oh
goalie.
yeah,
And so what's cool about that is imagine like you, right? Let's say you're an athlete. You play what, softball,
play
right? So you're an
baseball. Yeah,
athlete. You play
yeah,
baseball, right? So you play baseball. So imagine you're whatever at your normal job on a Friday afternoon doing whatever you do on the computer, notes and Excel spreadsheets and whatever. You're doing your job. But you're also like the backup to we'll just say baseball in this case. Like, can you imagine if you were like somewhat decent enough? I don't mean it as a slight, but obviously, like you're not a major
No.
league player, but you're considered like this backup. Like if every guy in front of me gets hurt, I'm going in on that field to play. Can you imagine? Like in hockey, it's kind of like the one sport where that can actually happen, where a guy who is, he's played at some point, obviously. That's why he is where he's like an emergency backup, but he's like at his normal job and he's probably at the game thinking, I'm never going to get in this game. There's no way the starter and the backup are going to get hurt. It doesn't happen very often at all. But can you just imagine, like, if you were that guy who was like in the dugout or in the bullpen and all of a sudden you had to go out and play?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that happen like once every year with the is it the E goalie you said? The emergency goalie? I mean,
Yeah, the
I
E-bug.
feel
Yeah.
like I've
Yeah. Yeah.
seen that a
Yeah.
couple of times recently where it's like some random guy
Yeah.
who's tabbed as the emergency goalie ends up getting into the game and getting a
Yeah.
win. So pretty improbable. I was just thinking about that. This is where my mind goes because this is what I think about sometimes. But with the Giants, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
they've had a COVID outbreak over the past couple of days, and they've had to make a number of roster moves. And I'm just like, well, logistically, at some point, there's going to be a breaking point where it's like you just can't get guys quick enough to the game. So it's like, what do they do? Do they just ask people like, hey, who plays baseball? Who brought their glove today? They're going out in center field.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that, but that'd be absolutely
Yeah.
crazy. And I don't
Yeah.
know I don't know what type of training those guys go through to be the EBUG.
Yeah.
I don't know if they practice with the team or not. Maybe they do. But yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
quite the experience.
I know the Blue Jackets had a guy, Bailey Seagraves, was their e-bug or whatever. And as far as if I recall, I believe that it's a guy who serves as the e-bug for either
Mm,
team, I believe.
really?
But I think it's like, I believe so. So like, I might be wrong, but I think that's what happened, or at least that's what I think happened with him, where he was there to potentially play for either team, in the game. But I think he practiced with the Blue Jackets. He lives in Columbus or
Hmm.
Ohio anyway. I think that's how it works. I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but anyway, I'm pretty sure the guy for the Ducks last night is cool because he's like 28. He's actually blind in one eye, and I think he's British, which is cool. But yeah, so it's pretty crazy. I think he did pretty well considering, obviously. But what position would you play if you were the guy to go out and play for the Giants?
Probably center field. Um, well, I mean, that's bold and way too confident. Left field. I would just hope nobody would hit a ball my way.
Right.
Yeah, that would be it. I would just say I'd be out there, and if it's not hit right to me, I'm probably not going to catch it.
Someone would have to heckle you too, just for the hell of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that'd be cool. I haven't been heckled a lot recently playing baseball.
Yeah. Maybe next game someone can at least heckle you to kind of make you feel like you're a major league player.
Maybe.
Jeff, it was great talking with you. We'll definitely keep up. When's your next radio appearance?
I don't know. It seems like it seems like my appearances come when they're playing on the road and the games end a little early, so there's time at night for me to jump on. I haven't heard anything yet, so I don't really know. Maybe soon, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be on pretty soon at some point for sure throughout the season. So, yeah, it's definitely good having you on, and I will be seeing you around the Twitter here shortly, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will.